Hi, today we're going to talk about the utility or program called awk on Linux. And we already looked at regular expressions. We already know that we can use grep as a utility to look for patterns, head and tail to extract some lines, cut command to extract portions. So last class we looked into sed, which is the stream editor, which also allows you to look for patterns and process data. awk is another such program which can do things that sed can and more. In fact, the strength of awk is to deal with things like comma delimited files or files which have different fields that are delimited or separated by comma or space or tabs. So let's look at how this will work. So when you look at the syntax of the awk command, first of all, it's going to use single quotations. And there's two things you're going to feed into the awk program. The first is any criteria that you want to use regarding which lines from a certain file, a text file, which lines do you want it to work upon? That's the first thing you're going to indicate. And then inside the curly brackets, you're going to put what action you want awk to do upon those lines. So let's see how this works. Let's actually go on to the Linux platform. So I have two windows opened here side by side so that we can look at the data and work on it at the same time. So I have a file called file2, into which I have some name, email, phone number, salary, and city. And I've also incorporated line numbers as a part of the data, just so that it makes it easier for us to see how awk is handling that. All right, so let me build awk command with very simple syntax first. So we're going to say awk, and now, as I said, we're going to begin with single quotes, and the data file we're going to use is the comma file2. So inside the single quotes, let's look at a situation where the only thing we're defining is the action. Action goes inside curly brackets. So let's say we wanted to print the data. So if we only say print, what that's going to do is it's going to print the entire line. And because we have not given any criteria for which lines to choose, this command in this format is going to end up printing every line. So it's going to be the same as if you said cat and the name of the file. So here we go, awk print. So all of these 8 lines are printed, and we would have gotten the same result as if we had said cat, comma file2. So a lot of the things that awk can do, there is other ways of doing it. It's just that awk generally make it simpler, and especially to extract and manipulate data, as we're going to see soon. All right. What if we wanted to use the awk to narrow down a certain number of lines? So again, within single quotes, and I'm going to use same file. But instead of giving the action, I'm going to give it which lines to work with. So capital NR refers to the number of the row, which basically means the line number. So if I put 2 equal signs here and I say 2, what this is saying is find the second line. So now, as you can see, it prints the second line only, because we said print us the number of row being 2, and that's it. Now, how come it worked when we didn't give any action? That's because the default action is to just print it out on the screen. So if we say nothing, it'll print everything that gets selected. What if we wanted to give a range of lines? So let's repeat this command, but now instead of just saying give us the NR equal 2, I'm going to say from here to the 4th line. So now we're saying from line number 2 up to line number 4. So it'll print 2, 3, and 4. So when we hit enter, you can see it prints 2, 3, and 4. So again, we did not give any action, so it simply printed by default the entire line which got selected. So it selected 3 lines, printed 3 lines. We can use regular expressions inside awk just as we could in sed. So let's say I wanted to look for Jim. So that's the pattern I'm looking for. To do that, the regular expression will come inside the forward slashes. And then we're going to use the same file. So I need to go in here and put my expression here. So since I know exactly what I'm looking for, I'm simply going to put it here and hit enter. So what it does is it goes and finds that pattern. And since that pattern only exists in one line, which is line number 4, that's what it's printing. If it had found the same name in more than one lines, it would have printed both of those. So here again is the case where we're only defining which lines to choose. We're not defining the action. In this case, lines to choose were being defined by one line or a range of lines. Here, the lines to choose will depend on which lines are going to have this pattern inside that line. So from here, let us, oh, by the way, this same result can be obtained by using head and tail that you already know about. So I could actually, since this is the 4th line, I could actually use this to find this pattern through grep. So I could have said grep Jim and comma file 2, and it would have found that line as well. So everything awk is going to do, there is other ways of doing it. Let's go back to how we defined the regular expression in awk. And if I actually go ahead and print, sort of give it the action, and the action being print, then it's going to do that same thing as well. So if I don't see anything, it assumes you want to print by default and prints the whole line. If I do say print within curly bracket and give nothing else, just the word print, then that is going to function exactly the same way, because it will print the entire line as long as the line matches this pattern. I can also say, if you see something like this, if you see $0, that also means the whole line. So you may not need that, but let's say you're looking at a script and you find something written like this. You need to understand what this means. So $0 simply means print the entire line. So again, we're getting the entire line printed. The power of awk starts to come when we, instead of printing the whole line, let's say we wanted to print just the emails. So if you look at this file, it's got the name, and then it's got the email and the phone number followed by other fields. So each of these is referred to as a field, or if you think in terms of a spreadsheet, this is a column. So if we want to extract the email, we're really looking at extracting the second column or the second field. So that's what we need to say here. So when we come here and say $2, we're really saying print the second field. So I'm actually going to use a comma file which does not have the line numbers to keep it simple. And notice that when I said print $2 comma file, which is the file here without the line numbers, we got nothing. So why do you think that is? That is because we're telling awk to pick up the second field, but we're not telling it how to determine when the second field starts. We know ourselves by looking at this that it's a comma that's delimiting the first field from the second and so on. But we need to tell that to awk, but we didn't. So how do we change this command so that we tell awk which delimiter to use to find out where the second field is? Well, we have to tell it by going -F. Think of that capital F, which stands for field. So we're saying for field delimiter, use a comma. Now when we do the same thing, it is able to pick out just the email correctly, because now it says, okay, this is what my first comma is happening, so this is my first field and this is my second field, and that's why it is able to pick that up. What happened here? Here it kept looking for a space or a tab, because that's the default. When you don't tell it any delimiter, it assumes there's a space or a tab which is used as a delimiter. So since there's no space or tab, it assumed this whole thing is one field. So it said, oh, there is no second field, and that's why when we said print the second field, it printed nothing, because there is no second field. So let me show you another file that I have here, tab file. So I took the same data, and instead of comma separating each field, I changed that to a tab separating each field. Now since awk uses tab or a space as a default delimiter, let's run this command on the tab file and see what happens. So I'm going to change this, so we're not telling it anything about the delimiter, and we're going to run this on the tab file. And why did it go to, and see how it gives it correctly? Why? Because it knows by default that using the tab, it will determine the next field. So that's field 1, tab, that's field 2. So it correctly picks out the field. So in other words, the only thing you have to remember is, in the data file, if each field is separated by a space or a tab, you don't need to say anything about what the delimiter is, because it'll use the default. If, however, it's anything other than space or tab, it could be a comma, sometimes it could be a colon, so anything other than a space or a tab, then you have to put this in, which says, please use the field delimiter as a comma or field delimiter as a colon. And then it'll be able to correctly pick out the field you're wanting to pick out. All right? Okay. Now here we're asking it to pick only one field, but we can make it pick multiple fields and print them. So let's go back to the comma file where we are correctly telling it to use comma as the delimiter. But let's say instead of printing just the second field, maybe email, and we also want it to print, so the fourth field. All right, so it's now printed the second field and the fourth field. Second field was email, this is third, fourth field was the salary. Okay, we can also do string comparisons, and we use the tilde sign, the squiggly tilde sign, to do that comparison. So what we're saying here, for example, is we already know we're invoking the awk command, where you're telling it what delimiter to use, and we're wanting to print the second field. But here we're saying from the value of the first field, which is the name, we want that to match this pattern. So when you want to compare the content, which is a string content, alphanumeric, then we use the tilde sign to make this comparison. And then whatever we're asking it to print, it will. So if we said nothing here, it would have printed the whole line, but we're saying print the second field, which is email, so that's what it prints. Similarly, I could use a regular expression here and say that for the first, instead of the first field, let's say we look at the phone number, for example. So that is the third field. So let's say in the third field, we want to match 647 at the start. So we have our regular expression syntax, which is we are anchoring it to the start of the third field right here. And if it starts with 647, we want to print the email for that. So it prints two emails. So for Jane, it's 647, and then for Chris, it's 647. That's why we're printing these. So here again, you can use any regular expression that you already know about. We can also print multiple things instead of just one. So if I repeat this command and I say, you know what, I want to print the phone number, which happens to be 123, the third field. So not only do I want the second, but I also want the third field. So now it's printing the name, the email followed by the phone number. And both the phone numbers here are the ones which start with 647. So hopefully you can start to see how powerful awk is. If we had to do this without awk, you have to think back to your cut commands, cut the right field, and then you pipe it into a grep command to use the regular expression. So it can be done, but it'll be a multi-step process. In awk, it's just one command, very straightforward. We can also do numeric comparisons in awk. So if I said awk, and maybe I want to do the same thing in that I want to check, actually let's check here. Maybe I want to look at the salary field, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in the fourth field, I want that record to be picked where the salary is $72,000. So the way I would say that is, I would say the fourth field, so $4. And to say equal, you have to put two equal signs. For a numeric comparison, it's not going to be the tilde. That was for string comparison. For numeric comparison, it's the greater than, equal, less than. And to represent equal, it's two equal signs. And I wanted 72,000. So if this is a matching record, so I'm going to look at, let's look at tab file. That way I don't have to worry about telling it what delimiter to use. So now it picked out this record or this line because this match is occurring. In the fourth field, it's 72,000. I can also use greater than, less than. So if I change this and I say I want everything that's greater than 72,000. So now all of these except for this one record, except for this one and this one, all the others are picked here because they're greater than 72,000. I can also combine more than one criteria. So here I want those which are greater than 72,000, but at the same time I want to say and it should be less than 90,000. So now only two of them qualify, so only 84 and 85,000, whereas here everything greater than 72,000 was being printed. So we can make multiple criteria for the matching here. All right, so that kind of gives you the main things that we can do with the awk program. So we saw how we can print things. So by default, it'll print the whole line. We can tell which line numbers it needs to focus on, or we can use regular expressions, either the entire pattern or specific fields in which we match either a string by using the tilde or match it to a number, either greater than, equal, less than, and so on, either for a certain field or for multiple fields with multiple criteria. And if the delimiter is just a space or a tab, we don't need to specify anything. But if a delimiter is anything else, like a colon or a comma, then we must specify that specific delimiter in order for it to recognize where one field ends and the next one begins. So you will use awk a lot if you're dealing with text files. And especially those text files where there's a lot of fields that are comma delimited or colon delimited. So that's where the power of awk will be most useful. Well, that's it for now. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.